what we imagine with belief and emotion eventually becomes our reality. Now think about that in the context of sexuality. Your fantasies aren't just mental play, they're personal prophecies waiting for understanding or transformation. From a metaphysical standpoint, every act of creation is a fusion of opposing forces. Male and female energies, not necessarily tied to gender, symbolize the dance of potential and intention. This is echoed in ancient spiritual traditions across the world. The Taoist principle of yin and yang reflects this beautifully, two opposing yet complementary energies that give rise to all life. Quantum physics, especially studies in observer effect and entanglement, suggest that what we focus on, not just observe but intend, can shape what actually happens in the physical world. If our consciousness can affect particles, why wouldn't our sexual energy, arguably one of our most charged forms of intention, have the same influence? This concept is richly expanded in the lesser-known book, The Alchemy of Sexual Energy, by Mantak Chia. While many people associate energy work with yoga or breath work, this book introduces Taoist methods of transforming sexual energy into creative and spiritual power. It shows how practices like microcosmic orbit meditation and inner smile techniques can transmute raw arousal into life force for healing, wisdom, and even enlightenment. The idea here isn't to suppress your desires, but to elevate them. Instead of letting desire control you or feeling ashamed by it, you can harness it as fuel. This is how sacred sensuality becomes possible. This is how empowered sexuality begins. You start seeing that every spark of desire is an invitation to create, to express, to transform. And when you stop fearing your urges and start working with them, something magical happens. Your fantasies become mirrors. Your longings become insights. Your energy becomes art. Trauma.
So you've got a great deal.
Let's look at something we rarely talk about openly. How much our past shapes what we crave in the present, especially when it comes to sexuality. Most people assume their desires arise naturally or randomly, but beneath those desires, especially the ones we feel most conflicted about, are often emotional imprints, echoes of experiences we've carried without realizing it. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of us that holds the emotions, memories, and instincts we've repressed. And the shadow often shows up through symbols, in dreams, in triggers, and yes, in sexual fantasies. If you've ever wondered why something arouses you that also confuses or even disturbs you, it may not be about the thing itself. It may be a disguised cry from your subconscious for emotional healing, inner child liberation, or integration of some unresolved moment. This doesn't mean all desire is trauma-based, but certain patterns, especially compulsions, taboo fixations, or fantasies involving dominance, submission, or even helplessness, may point to old wounds trying to express themselves. This is where fetish psychology meets spiritual shadow integration. The key isn't to judge these feelings, but to listen. What are they telling you about the parts of yourself still seeking emotional safety or personal liberation? Healthy sexuality begins with healthy boundaries, and that means practicing ethical intimacy, where consent is clear, power is balanced, and connection is conscious. Healing sexuality is not about acting out every desire. It's about understanding the root of those desires and asking, is this helping me grow? Or am I reenacting pain? Social and spiritual psychology helps us here. It teaches us that the more we explore our unspoken desires through safe and respectful self-inquiry, the more emotional freedom we gain. We begin the process of shadow work, not to shame the shadow, but to bring it into the light. And when shame is replaced with understanding, we grow closer to our authentic desire. One powerful but often overlooked book that brings all of this together is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's a groundbreaking work that shows how the body remembers trauma, even if the mind forgets. This includes sexual trauma, neglect, emotional invalidation, or moments of confusion from early development. Our bodies don't lie. They hold on to what the mind tries to bury. And that's why so many sexual patterns are actually the body's way of speaking up. Finally. So when a fantasy arises that feels strange or intense, pause. Not to push it away, not to act on it mindlessly, but to ask, what part of me is this coming from? What wound is this trying to heal? Because sometimes sexuality isn't about pleasure. Sometimes it's about closure. And every time you choose to approach it with awareness, you turn it into a doorway, not just into pleasure, but into profound emotional healing. Social and relational context. Now let's shift our focus to something just as revealing: how our sexuality functions within relationships, and how much of it is shaped by the world around us. Sexuality is often treated as a private, internal matter, but it's also deeply social. It's tied to the people we're drawn to, the roles we perform, and the norms we either follow or resist. That's why understanding sexual compatibility means understanding the space between you and another person, the energetic bridge where desire meets connection, vulnerability, and sometimes conflict. Think about how your early experiences of love, rejection, safety,